Ah, no está. Los dispositivos.
¿Hay más con traducción? ¿O va a tener un par de casos? Esperemos a que venga Selena. Sí. Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Luisa Moreno, yo soy la encargada de pasantías en el Instituto Monteverde. Y hoy para mí es un placer presentar a Ruslan Bryan, que ha sido pasante con nosotros desde enero. Ha estado con nosotros por 10 semanas. Es estudiante de la Universidad de Oregon, la Universidad Estatal de Oregon, y hoy nos va a presentar un poquito sobre las aventuras de un pasante en el Instituto Monteverde. Como que le cambió un poquito el nombre. Ok, entonces queda con ustedes, Ruslan.
Been here for the center trip for the last 2 months. It's been amazing, and this is going to encompass, for this presentation, is going to encompass like the work I've done and my experience with all of you guys at the Institute. everything, and especially the water, and or just like source of water. And I'm touching on that because that was kind of the main project I was working on, was water quality testing here at the Institute with so this might be a little repetitive, but what I learned here was what happens with the cloud forests in Monteverde is that when the clouds come over the ridge and they hit the mountain, the water condenses and it's increased by the surface area created by epiphytes and just the trees in general. And this is a really cool process where the water condenses and the trees and the epiphytes bring it to the ground. And that accumulation of water from the clouds is what runs into the streams, and the rivers providing water, a source of water for like all the way from the ridge, the continental divide, all the way down to the ocean, for all the wildlife, the towns, a lot of things. Yeah. And the importance of water can be like overstated, and also therefore the importance of cloud forest and its function in bringing that water down to the ground. And we use water for everything. It supports all kinds of life, including our own. We use it for agriculture, just drinking, cleaning, everything, for power, for industry, for like fighting wildfires, for massages, if you're crazy enough. That's really helpful from South Carolina. Yeah. And so because we use, I was locked out of my hands. Let's hit them. My university has this authentication thing, so if I don't like touch things for a while, it logs me out. And because we use water for so many aspects of our lives, it's important to consider its state or quality and how we're affecting it just with our use of it, or the just our proximity to it even. So like here you're not allowed to go to a certain like proximity to streams and stuff, and that's because just like our presence nearby, and we use the land, and the thing we do ends up in the water and affects it. And it's important to understand how we affect it, because that's will help us better understand how we can like change things that will help affect our own health and that of the wildlife around us. And so that sort of encompasses the mission of the Adopt a Stream program that's run by Ruslan Bryan here at the Institute. And the program basically monitors water quality at different elevations throughout Monteverde, from the like ridgetop in the reserve and stuff all the way down here in Santa Elena, to see how the water quality changes with human activity, and just to have that comparison of how water changes in quality and state. And it's very important, especially in Monteverde, because we're at the source here, and the water generated here is the same water that passes through the like lower elevations of the lower lands, the towns down there, and all the like wildlife down there as well. And if the water here gets polluted or contaminated, that's the same water, and it's the same kind of quality that gets passed downstream, and it all compounds with human activity, and the further down goes, more human activity, so it just builds and builds. So it's really important to understand how that works up here, where we're at the source. And again, thinking about the usability and health, and that all happens from here, or human health, to all the way down to the ocean. So then I wanted to talk quickly about the type of contaminants and pollution I'm referring to, and it's not all just like physical garbage in the streams, and this isn't like Costa Rica specific, this is the entire world. So things I want you guys to think about is first gray water. So the stuff that comes from our sinks, our like bathrooms, or like the showers and the sinks there. And so the contamination would be like soap and a lot of like the leftover, like the foods and stuff from our plates and that kind of stuff. And that can end up in the streams and rivers and affect the water quality drastically. And then there's also kind of like shown here where it's just like the amount of stuff in the water, and this happens a lot when it rains or there's a lot of movement or turbidity in the water, just like dirt and stuff gets kicked up. So then the water isn't clear, and that's like a lot of things are adapted to live in those kinds of waters, but it can really impact a lot of organisms because it would be like if you fill the air with tons of stuff, it affects with like fish, it inhibits like gas exchange on the gills because there's more stuff and less surface areas being used for gas exchange, just visibility, light can get through for plant or aquatic plants to photosynthesize, which is a huge source of food and habitat for a lot of animals and stuff. And then, you know, if there's just more stuff in the water, there's less good stuff that can dissolve into it and stay. And then that happens a lot with erosion, and we'll talk more about that in a later slide, but like if there's less force, there's less stuff holding the dirt together, so if it rains or just like weathering occurs, you get this a lot more because there's nothing holding the soil back from getting picked up in the water. And then the other thing that's pretty significant, especially like in this day and age, is fertilizers and agricultural runoff. So, and I wish I had a picture from Oregon because I work in this one farm, and there's a river that runs between, like through the middle of the farm and before the farm. The water looks amazing. Throughout the stretch of farm, it looks like a swamp, and you can like just smell like the like plant growth in it and like the decomposition and everything that happens. It looks like this, but the water isn't that clear at all. And then so all the nutrients and stuff from the fertilizers that run off into the water, like phosphorus and nitrogen, those affect like algae and give them the nutrients to grow and bloom, and that can again inhibit like penetration of water, so it inhibits photosynthesis for plants, and then also when the algae dies, the bacteria that like processes that consumes a lot of oxygen and creates hypoxic conditions, so it takes all the oxygen out of the water, and if there's no oxygen in the water or low amounts, then things that need it, like fish, start to die off. So that's another really important contaminant to think about.
Ruslan, what is that last picture? I don't understand.
That last picture? Okay, yeah, so that's off the coast of some place, and that's algal blooms off the coast. Yeah. So, yeah. And it
Too
could be,
abstract for me.
yeah. Yeah. So then, the Adopt a Stream program is really cool because it specifically looks at bioindicators to gauge the quality of the water. And bioindicators are living things that indicate the health of the ecosystem. And there's a lot of examples. For example, like amphibians and frogs are really good with that because amphibians usually live in like very narrow ranges of environmental change. We can see that, and if the frogs start dying off or moving, it's so a lot of them are aquatic insects or other arthropods, so little creepy crawlies, and a lot of them are the larval state of a lot of insects. So this is a stonefly in the family Prividae, and so that's the baby and goes right into a stonefly. That's a cockroach. It's a really good indicator of water quality, or it's an indicator of good water quality, so cockroaches are good. And then this, for example, these are like fly larvae. And so each of these belong to a certain family, and then there's this index, biological, Great Biological Monitoring Party, it's specific to Costa Rica. So this index assigns each insect family a value, and then based on that value, you can go out to a stream, get a sample, collect a bunch of these guys, and once you get them, you can identify that to the family. The family. So like this is Indipter, so or that's the word, but Chironomidae, so that's a family of flies, and I think its number is 2, and the range is between 1 and 9. So once you get your sample, you identify them, you assign them each that corresponding value, and then you add up all those values. You can use that to gauge the quality of the water based on this chart. So if it's like below 15, that means the water is really bad, and you probably didn't find a lot in it because there's not a lot of stuff alive in it. A score of 61 to 100 is like regular quality water, so like there like some maybe contamination, but not a lot. And then stuff above 100 to 120 and above is indicators of really good water. There's like no contamination or very, very little. Yeah, so based off of that, you can gauge the quality of water, and it's because all of these guys have different tolerances they can stage. So like, for example, these guys can survive very low oxygen conditions, and these guys don't. So if you have a stream with very low levels of oxygen, then you'll find a lot of these guys, and I'll tell you about an example of that, and none of these guys, and that tells you how good the quality of the water is. And then, yeah, and I'll talk about the other properties later. But these guys are generally just really cool. This one builds houses out of leaves. Really fun to look at. Yeah, so those are those guys.
So the more insects in the water, the better?
Yeah, so, yeah, that's a really good question. So the more insects, yes, but it depends on what insects. So like if you see 100, like thousands of these guys like wiggling around, that's probably not good. If you get a lot of different ones, so the more biodiversity you have, that's probably an indicator of really good quality. And I'll talk about that a little later when I have like more data and stuff to show. So yeah, that's a really good question. So then for the sampling, like I mentioned, well, first off, it's really fun because you actually get to go out and play with this stuff, and that's probably one of my best like work experiences, and actually like, holding these guys wriggling around in my hand. So this is kind of part of the process. You just go with a net and sample a bunch of stuff, throw it in a bowl, and then look at what you have. And so we again sample stuff in a large range of elevation and proximity to like human activity and stuff. So we sampled all the way the Monteverde Reserve, and then down into like right here. So we had a sampling site in Crandall on my end that were there, and then another place was like down here, just across the street, and then on the way to Santa Elena there were a couple, and then there was one in Santa Elena. Yeah, so that just gives us a good range of comparing what kind of like activity impacts the water in what way. So the results for 2023, so while I've been here, the sampling that we did, there's some good and some bad, and yeah, it's really interesting. So for example, well, this is pie charts, and the green is like the percentage of families that are like regular quality or indicators of regular quality water. The blue is like excellent or good quality water. The red is the percentage of families that we found that were indicators of bad quality water, so the indicators of present contamination. And then some of these gray slivers were the ones that we either couldn't identify, but I think we got them all. It's just the ones that are there, but they're not indicators of anything, so we didn't pick one of those because they didn't survive a lot of different things. So then here's the values that indicate the like on the stuff from previous years. So Rio Negro and the it's the one from at the reserve. So those have a lot of diversity in the sampling. So a lot of different families, and again, that's a really good indicator of water quality. This one is interesting because this is the river that's right across the street here, and we found a lot of different things. And it's still really good quality water despite like having houses and other things, which is really interesting. And then La Máquina, this is in Crandall, so I was hoping to see more or a better score for Crandall, but there also isn't any families that are indicators of bad quality, so there's probably not a lot of contamination, so there might be other stuff going on. Because there still were 45% of the sample was indicators of good quality water, and then a little over half was regular quality water, so it's still good, it's just, not as high as it could be, being in Crandall. And then, Sociedad Casa Arte, this was also interesting because it's pretty good quality, and it's down the road here past Casem. And then Colegio is an example of really bad quality water. It's at a camping spot in downtown Santa Elena, but towards the bottom and stuff. So there were no families that were indicators of good quality water. A lot of were some regular, and a bunch were bad, and it got a score of 31. And we'll look at the data in a second, but pretty much all those little red marks. And then so one thing I wanted to mention for the rivers with really good quality water, the presence of these red ones doesn't necessarily mean that the water's bad or there's something wrong. These guys can just survive really contaminated and polluted water. So if they're in a good quality river, that doesn't mean that the river's bad. That just means that they're there because they can survive there. So the important thing is to look at the index numbers. Yeah.
The difference between La Máquina and Quechua is that La Máquina didn't have any samples of insects, or?
So I think, well, there weren't as many. Just for I don't have more, I think, but I'd have to go back and look at the long list of African rivers that we found. But that usually, a low score usually means you don't have a lot of diversity, so if there are a lot of insects in the water, they could have if you sample 50 and then 30 of them are the same family, and then another 10 are another family, and then I can't do math. Another 10 are another family, you only have 3 families, so that would give you a much lower score no matter how many you're finding. So
is it mostly oxygen, or?
It's a lot of things, and it depends.
Okay.
And that would have to be best I can each record. And so the people who created the index would probably know better. But it's a combination of all those things. So I would love to look at it more closely and understand it on that level. But we'll go into the other properties of the water here in a second. So here's an example of raw data. So this is for one sampling, so going out there once and doing it at one river, so this is Rio Negro in February. And this is a 4. Ignore that dash. This number is a 4. So this is the list of orders. This identified out to the family, the number of individuals that we had, so 279 is a lot, and then the index score. And as you can see, that's just broken down all the good guys, so these have a high score on the index. There's regulars 4 to 6, and then anything between 1 and 3 is bad indicators, so that's these guys. And then this just kind of get another visual comparison of a good river or good quality water and bad quality water, where there's, in Colegio, there's no indicators of good quality water, or good quality, excellent quality water with little to no contamination. And then there's more bad indicators, but then also, this is one family, but the amount of individuals, it says 300, but we honestly couldn't count them, and that was just how many we could sit there and count, but we'd be there all day long counting little worms in the water because there were a lot. So I like to look at this kind of stuff because it gives you another visual of like, even if you're only adding up the index values, the amount can also tell you a lot. So like if you had like a ton of these guys and not just 4, that probably says something. And yeah, so just the numbers of individuals themselves is also important to look at. So I like to show the data this way. And then here's pictures of some of the rivers. I wanted to talk a little bit about like types of contamination again. So this is the one right across the road here, and while we were there, we saw a lot of like bubbles come through, and that could just be the water moving around, but it like all of a sudden it was more than usual, so that was probably like soapy water coming through a little bit from like a shower or a kitchen. While we were there, and this is right across the road from Rio Negro where we did the sampling, and it's a good example of how like human activity can lead to erosion, and then that erosion in the water and just kind of like muck it up and make it dirty. So this is right across the road, and this is was probably just throwing a bunch of dirt in the water from the road, and then from the farm that's right on the other side of those trees. And this is the Colegio, and that's the really bad one, or the one that with all really bad water quality, where we found tons of carnivore, which are those little fly larvae, and they were just hundreds. And the water there was really, really shallow, and it was really stagnant, or like not moving fast in a lot of parts, and all those things come into place. So like thinking about which factors really are the ones that play, it's kind of a culmination of everything. Because so the things we looked at were like the water temperature, the dissolved oxygen, the conductivity of the water, so conductivity of electricity and stuff. TDS is total dissolved oxygen, or total dissolved solids, so like the amount of like solid particles in the water. pH, or phosphate, nitrogen, turbidity, which is the amount of stuff that get caked up in the water, kind of related to TDS. And then flow is like how fast the water is moving. And one example I wanted to share was like heat affects the water. So like if the water is really shallow and not moving fast, and especially during like the dry season, that elevates the temperature of the water. And when there's also high temperatures, there's a lot less oxygen that can dissolve into the water. So like all those things put together can lead to just water poor quality, that can support low life, and then so that's something to think about. And then here's a graph comparing the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water between those sites. La Máquina just had a really low score, so it doesn't show up, and you can figure out the graph, but it's there, it's just really low. And then like Colegio has a significantly low. Casa Arte, again, was surprising because it had a good score for the index for water quality, but it still is down there. So that was kind of an interesting outlier. I'm not sure how to fix that. But the rest are about like you want it at around like 100, because that means the water has oxygen. Yeah. And then another thing to say about like Colegio is that you could just like kind of smell the river when you were like the stream when you were kind of close. It wasn't really strong, but you could smell it a little bit, and you could feel it, like the little slime and grease on your fingers and stuff like that. And that was just from probably the gray water that was in the water, just after being downstream of all human activity and stuff. So then here's an update on 2022. So I entered a bunch of data from last year, and this is kind of comparing with previous years. So a bunch of them are kind of similar, but then there are some of them no. So like here, how there was kind of a decrease in diversity in the amount of like good indicating families and regular ones. And then this year, last year, there was a lot more, or a lot less indicators of good quality water, and about the same regular trend is that, and Lisa mentioned this before in previous presentations, how there seems to be a trend towards better quality water with the pandemic because there's less traffic, less people, less tourists coming in. And then now that it's kind of all coming back, there's some indication that the water quality is kind of like it's becoming a little worse again. And it's probably just because of the amount of human traffic that's coming in. Yeah, so that was interesting to see. So then another big part of this program is the education aspect. So like so we've been taking groups and stuff to the rivers, especially Crandall and the reserve, to show like kids especially and teach them about microinvertebrates, water quality, and it's really cool because the stuff that like Luisa teaches is like things that people can take home and do their own kind of citizen science and check their own water quality in a very simple way. There's some old guides and stuff that can be used to like easily identify macroinvertebrates, and then you kind of has an explanation of how to work. Pass that around. And then the other thing is there's also like textbooks, and I love this book, but there's textbooks with little diagrams and stuff on how to identify these, and there'll be some where it's like, you know, you're looking at a tiny part of one macroinvertebrate, and it looks exactly like another one, but you're trying to dissect it on that level, and that really requires a microscope. And kind of one goal that Luisa had that I got to help out with was making a kind of updated guide that's really easy to use that anyone can take home, and this is kind of what would be a rough draft of it, and I'll have one done, or all I have to do is like change the font and then it'll be done. But that's one that I put together. That's kind of an updated version. It's a little more organized, and it has explanations of what to look for when you're identifying them with the pictures, so that you're not just looking at pictures and trying to decide, but it tells you like one macroinvertebrate might look exactly the same as the other one, but it has 2 tails instead of 3 tails. So then you can decipher which one's which, and then I have little paragraphs that explain that, hopefully well enough. And the goal is so that anyone can do this. Like this is a group of kids who are like this old. Height-wise, I don't know. And the attention span wise maybe wasn't big, but they were enjoying it and having fun. And they were able to identify a bunch of stuff. And then there's a group of older students who did really well. And it's a lot of fun. So yeah. And the goal is just so you don't need like a microscope to look at it. You can just take a guide and do it yourself in your backyard if you have it. And then, so here's an example of this guide. Kind of looks like this. I try to make it pretty simple, but I use a lot of words sometimes. And then there's an explanation of how to use the guide, the index, what are vitamin indicators, and everything in Spanish, for that part at least. So and then kind of taking that information is really important because a lot of times people do the research and find things out, but then they don't use that information. And this is just a problem with people, and maybe not a problem with just the state. So things that you could do, I guess, if you sample macroinvertebrates and it indicates you have bad water quality, a lot of times it's stuff that's upstream they can't do, but things they can help would be even as simple as using less soap. When you shower or wash dishes, using less water because that kind of lowers the amount that's flowing out of your home or where you work or other places, and then even having a strainer on your kitchen sink to keep food particles from going down there, because if that stuff ends up in the water, that's just more physical stuff, but it's also stuff for bacteria to grow and other things that could again affect those algae blooms and that kind of stuff. So and then on a higher level, which is cool, is to a grease trap and that kind of system, and then eventually great water processing plant somewhere. But there are small things that everyone can do that just generally help increase the quality of the water. reforestation. So this is working with Danielle. Shout out. And this is really cool, and I need my notes for this. So I learned a lot about conservation and restoration, and just kind of forestry in general, geared towards conservation, and the importance of like corridors and everything. So kind of what I learned in the story here was that based on like economic priorities and just like things that people needed, a lot of the forest was cut down, and there were certain incentives for farming and cattle ranching, and then that kind of cleared away a lot of the forest. And then one great thing that all of you guys are doing at MBI is kind of helping restore the habitat, like with Crandall or Calandria, with reforestation, with yeah. So, and it's really good because a lot of the like farm stuff isn't really sustainable because the forest is like a functioning ecosystem that's part of this world, and it's a very rough thing to talk about, but it's very important for like function, I guess, because it provides habitat for a lot of wildlife. It stops erosion. It sequesters CO2. It produces oxygen. It decreases the amount of heat because you don't have like a bunch of like comparing a forest to concrete will absorb a bunch of heat, and like global warming is a touchy subject, but like just creating more heat versus like a forest that will like draw all that in kind of thing and dissipate it. Yeah, so that's kind of like things that are important with the forest, and then yeah, and one cool thing is that a lot of it is like species driven. So like with the Bellberg corridor, which is a big project of creating a corridor, a reforested area from the ridge down all the way down to the ocean, and it's geared towards protecting the Bellberg, which is a really cool bird. But then one really cool thing about it is, and that's just kind of how the world works, is in conservation, is that you can use umbrella species. So if you protect one species and you provide a habitat for it, then at the same time you're providing like the same habitat for so many other things. And you'll kind of see the diversity of the camera traps that I set up and stuff. So another great thing about the reforestation program is that it's specific to planting native species, and that's great because, like Danielle says all the time, you can plant a bunch of trees, but if those trees aren't native, they don't provide anything for the species and the wildlife that evolved with it, then it's not really doing anything. So it's important to plant native species, and that's what the Monteverde Institute is doing. And again, the coolest thing is that the institute will give out trees. It's for free, so it's really encouraging. And if those trees don't make it, and you come back the next year and ask for another 100 trees, you guys will give it to them, which is really, really cool. And I think it's just a really positive attitude. It's great. And then, so here's some pictures of the groups, like the tourist and NGO groups that come through that help out with planting during that season, and preparing bags. And it's a fun process. I learned that even if some people don't like getting dirt under their fingernails, they're really happy to learn for the most part. Maybe not if I ask them to get down on their knees and do reading, but yeah, they're usually really happy to help. And then another thing that I really enjoyed was learning how people here are very interested in helping the environment and participating in the reforestation programs. So yeah, it's just a really good environment for that. So then kind of going off of that, Luis then I set up a bunch of camera traps in Crandall and Calandria, to compare to see what kind of animals we could see into, because the forests are different. One's a lot older or has a lot of old growth, and some is, and Calandria is only 20 years old. So trying to see what animals were using those areas, those habitats, and comparing it to see if there was any interesting things or anything. Yeah. And that's it's a good way to gauge the success of reforestation. So here's a map of Crandall and Calandria. So there's old growth, or secondary growth, which is like the older forest, and then primary growth, which is the newer forest, in different areas, and then, well, secondary growth is pretty much all that one there, and it was really interesting to see with the data because, well, it was just interesting, but this just to show the maps of the two areas, and to emphasize that one has older growth and one has newer growth. So then here's a bunch of stuff that we found in the Grand Reserve. So there was a bunch of foods here, and that was really cool to see. Ocelots, peccaries, skunks, these are parrots. A lot of dogs and people, but that was cool to see. Possum, squirrels, this guy's really cool, and I'm pretty sure this is the guy who left stuff on the line. Yeah, but yeah. Yeah, so this is just cool to show like all the kinds we saw. This one's hard to see, but it's a crested on the ground. Yeah. And then in comparison, this is Bacalandia, which had a lot of the same species, but interestingly it had different ones. And it's very interesting because it's newer growth, but it kind of showed more diversity. And I'll go into that more with the data. I'll just let you admire some of these pictures real quick. And this is cool. This is a blurry thing that I was trying to figure out this morning. But it was, it's northern Canto or something, but it's an anteater, which is really cool. I saw this huge lizard on the camera. I don't know if you guys can see that's a frog. It's like this big. So that was really interesting to see a frog there. And there's a river right down there. But I don't know. This is a lowland pocket. It looks kind of like the agouti, but different. Or pumas. And then, one really cool thing is that there were tons of images of foxes, and I'm pretty sure it was all the same fox. But you would see it going in one direction sometimes, but every time I saw it connect back, which is most of the footage, it was holding something in its mouth, like a mouse, and you can see a long tail or a bird. And it's holding something in both of those pictures. It's kind of hard to tell, but if you're watching the video, you can see like a tail or just something hanging there. So it was really cool watching that thing find food and do its hunting stuff. And there's a little agouti baby unicorn. That's adorable. So then here's kind of the data comparing stuff. So again, the most interesting thing was that there were more species in Bacalandia, which is newer growth. One thing about that is that there is like older forest down in the lake underneath it, so it could be a lot of stuff that's like using that area and then coming up. One thing about the reptiles and amphibians is that it's a lot warmer down there, so that's why why we saw those like big lizards and stuff. And then yeah, so it's also like a more exposed area. So that was one thing I was thinking about, is how like you're able to see a lot more. It's smaller, there's like less habitat, but it's kind of the same habitat. So if there's something there, you'll see it. Whereas with Crandall, it's huge, and there's different like micro habitats, like in this direction, but also in this direction. So like I've been like climbing trees, and all the crested ponds I see like in person are like way up there. So like I'm not gonna see those setting on the camera trap on the ground. I did see some, but not as many. So there's probably a lot more of that forest that uses a lot larger range of habitat, and you have to look for them in those areas to find them, especially birds. But it was really interesting to see the things in Bacalandia that were different. Yeah. And then another thing of note is that both were heavily trafficked by humans and were just people and dogs. In Bacalandia, there were cats and dogs just on their own, and also cows, and they weren't just walking like on the edge where there's like more towards the farms, but they were like walking all the way through like Bacalandia and stuff. So if we go back to the map real quick. So like a lot of the cows were like coming through here, but then they were also going this way, which was interesting to see. So they were just exploring that, so it's maybe an indicator that like they were always using that area. And then once the reforested area, like area, had growth in it, they kind of moved up and started going into that area. So that was cool. Like the puma is there, and it doesn't necessarily want to be seen. Like likes to be around people. So like maybe the human stuff might change its pattern of like out of where it goes if there's people there or not. But it's really like they're still there. They just don't like to be seen by people. Yeah. So yeah. And I didn't see any like cats or dogs carrying anything in their mouths, so that's also a good thing. But cows probably should be roaming through there. And then this just kind of to show the process of camera traps, and I like bugs, so I got distracted a lot by bugs. Sorry, Lisa. And it's a fun process of like trying to strap a camera to a tree. And if you have a spot but no tree, it's really hard. So here you have it on a small tree with a stick there to angle it down to actually look at the trail, and then it's going through another tree that happens to have like a hole through it. So you like, yeah, it's fun. But it's a process. And then over there is like pictures of me trying to remember where all the camera traps were. And like there's just a vine hanging, so I was trying to remember that, and Luis is marking a spot on the trail with some orange vine, so you can, whenever we were going back to collect the cameras, we knew where they were because they were possible to see. And I got tons of chiggers trying to find camera number 6. So 6 is my least favorite number now, and I lost my water bottle, so if anyone sees that. Yeah. So that was the camera traps, and all the footage is going to be here, so if you want to use it or anything, yeah, it's all, yeah. And then another really cool thing that I got to participate in is bird banding. So this was one of Luis's projects where they're going to La Calandria, setting up mist nets, so these nets that really in the morning will catch birds that are flying. And the point of this project is to kind of take a census of birds that are migratory and native, like local birds, to see where, like, what birds are in La Calandria if they're using that reforested area, and then very interesting also if migratory birds are doing this. So like a bird that's like up in Canada or the US somewhere will travel down here during its migration period, and if like we see that in La Calandria, then that means that it's stopping there to use the resources of the new forest and stuff like that, which is really important because a lot of these birds travel really far apart, and they require a lot of like energy and resources to do that, and if there's no habitat, then they can't do that, or they'll go and then, let's say 1 year there's a forest, they came through, it was fine, next year they come back, and there's no longer that forest, that's like, they might not make it because they don't have anything to eat, and it takes a lot of energy. And then also shout out to Diego, who's an expert in bird banding, and is really good at identifying them, which is really, it's a difficult process. So like on a bird, people, just with the bugs, you look at absolutely everything. So like we measure the beak, the size of the wings, everything. One thing he was really good at was looking at the generations of feathers. So if it was like new feathers from its like first year, or the next year it changes it, and some birds it's really hard to tell, so it's just really interesting to like watch them, like, you know, flipping through books like this but for birds, and like trying to figure that out and stuff, and he was really good at it. Yeah, and then so these birds were banded, pretty much all of them, with little tags so that they can be identified if they're recaptured somewhere else in the world. And again, that could be here like Calandria, that could be like thousands of miles away, which is really cool. Yeah, we got to see some really cool birds. I got to practice like Miss Nettie would like take them out, and I got good at setting up nets and taking them down. And then here's, this bird was here, I got stuck in the institute, but Luis is holding it in a very proper old fashioned way, which is cool. Yeah, she's really good with birds. So yeah, that was bird and it's just crazy how like many things birds can tell you. Like this is a diagram of like fat stores that they'll have for migration and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just important because birds do so much in the world. So taking account of their like presence is really important to kind of again measure them up with the success of like reforestation projects and other stuff, just the same as like with the camera traps looking at other things. So then, yes, I wanted to say thank you 1,000 more times to Alan and Sylvia and Ariane for having me in their home. I had an amazing time, and I feel like I have a family here. Kind of thing. And I learned a lot, and I had a lot of really fun experiences, especially with tea making, some cooking. We went to the beach. It was a really fun time. We found coconuts, and we were like caving and splitting them open on rocks. It was amazing. And yeah, and so he's there. This is good. And then we were also playing with carpet crabs in the sand a lot, so we made an obstacle course and we raced them. And I think they're one most of the time. You notice how to choose the right kind of crabs? Did you get your ball back? And then monkeys were definitely a part of the home. But yeah, it was, too many movies to be said about how cool it was. Okay. And then just hear some other experiences. I got to hang out with the Quake community a bit. I went to other square dances. It's in the top square, and that was fun. I can't dance. But yeah, we were Connor and Michael. That was coming through, and that was really fun. I can't cook, but that was really fun. And you remember this? We did watch the sunset, and then we met a cow that same night, and it was amazing. But that's one thing I learned is that the sunset in Monteverde and Costa Rica in general are some of the most beautiful ones. That was also a really fun night with everybody. That's big 30 those questions. And then I got to surf a little bit, which I was really excited about. And then a lot of things remind me about like back home, and not necessarily boarding, but like Ukraine and Georgia, stuff like that. Like in the States, like public transportation is terrible, it doesn't exist. But I got to ride the bus here and hold on to the no handle over the bumps and turns and stuff like that. And that reminded me a lot of home, so I was really happy. And then one other thing I want to talk about, another great experience was Sun Canada. So Lucia was trying to sunset there. It was amazing. I had way too many photos of animals and wildlife there. But that was a really cool experience. And then one story I have to share from that, other than swimming in a really freezing, was we got, after a long hike down to the station, I was like, okay, we have like an hour to kill, and I was like, well, I'll go look around and stuff. So I went on a trip like 10 minutes in. I like feel this presence, look around, and there's a snake right there by my foot, and it's black, yellow, red, yellow, black, yellow, red, yellow. So like you guys know the rule, right? So I'm freaking out, my heart's going like this, and I back away, and I'm holding the stick, so I start poking it, and then following it through the woods, and it's being very docile, it's just trying to escape. So then I reach down and start messing with it some more, and eventually I have it by the tail and its head on the stick, and I'm like walking back to the station because I've gone that far and I have to show someone in case I die. Like this, I wanted to share because I don't know if this is real or not, but I'm like, it might not be a real one. So I got to the station and I don't want to walk in with this potentially venomous snake, so I like slip off my boot and put the head inside and crawl in. I walked in, and Mark, I forget his last name, but Mark, who's an amazing person in naturalist, he was setting up his presentation, and I walked in and I'm like, yo, Mark, come on. I don't know what to do. I just want to know if it's real, and again, I'm about to walk this room back. So I like get him to come outside, I want to surprise him, so I'm not telling him what it is, and I just set my boot out on the grass, open it, and then the snake pops his head out, and he freaks out. Like, it's real, it's real, it's real. And then like, after a few minutes later, he looks closer and he's like, okay, maybe it's not real. And then we like, he like starts describing to me. I'm like, well, can you tell me what it is? Because if it's not real, I'm gonna pick it up. So then he started telling me all the markings, so I got to learn some more snake eating. So like if you see a coral snake and the bands are like broken up, so they're not perfect and they don't go all the way around, and the belly's like a different color, it's not a coral snake, and it has a different ends. But it turned out to be a really cool snake, and then he scared some of the students with it, or tried to, because he like, I didn't know butterfly net and he passed it around. And then we got to talk about like how to ID, and that was kind of a fun experience. But I love reptiles, I love snakes, not just toys, so that was really cool for me. And Mark then told me that it reminded me of another time that a student, like years ago, brought him a hat, and when she opened the hat, an eyelash viper peeked its head out. So I'm happy that wasn't the case this time. He was screaming at her, and she set it down very gently. So that was, yeah. But yeah.
Now I can laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Lucy's new favorite phrase for me is I'm gonna kill you. So yeah, I don't know. This between this and this, I've had an amazing experience, and I want to thank everybody for getting that to me. Yeah. And just sharing absolutely everything. I'll never forget. You don't get to leave with all of you more at more levels. So yeah. Okay, now you do. It was very fun. And I got to see puma tracks and more pectorals at first, well, not first, but yeah, these guys have really bad claws, so don't pick them up. You can pick them up if they're big, because they don't sting if they're big. They're very like, yeah. And this place is, oh, it did see fish also. That was really cool. Yeah. And then I think the most magical thing about Costa Rica is the fireflies. So I've like I've seen them before in my life, but like never like just hundreds like shining through them. Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing that.